Welcome to the HR Insider, your go to podcast for insights into the ever evolving world of human resources and organizational strategy. I'm your host, Harshal. Today, we are exploring a fascinating and often overlooked sector aviation services and airlines catering. This industry operates with precision, ensuring that every flight is equipped and every passenger needs are met, all behind the scenes. Joining us is Ms. Harsha Vatnani, Director HR at LSG Skychef India, with over 16 years of global HR experience across the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. Harsha has led organizational development and employee engagement initiatives across diverse industries. Her vision and people centric approach have been instrumental in navigating the complexities of the aviation services sector. Harsha, welcome to the HR Insider podcast. It's absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Harshal. It's been a pleasure as well. I'm happy to speak to you about this industry that I'm so passionate about.
And I'm looking forward to learn so many new nuances about this industry. Trust me, all I know is there's a company called LSG Sky Chef, and all they do is serve meals in our airlines. So, right, excited to know more about it. But before I get into that, I'm very keen to know more about your professional journey. Your professional journey is so rich. Could you share how it brought you into the aviation services space and what kept you engaged in it?
Right. So thank you for that question. It's been an interesting journey over the last 16 years or so. I started as a software engineer, believe it or not, and did about 4 years of coding before I realized I was more drawn into people programs and how people
Hmm?
work, right? And at Infosys, being a massive organization as such, it provided me opportunity right there and then to figure out some specifications in HR, develop some insights into it, and gain knowledge while being a software engineer itself. So that led a spark, and this spark led me to do my full-time MBA in HR, human resources. Then I joined subsequently in various HR roles. I pursued HR business partnering. I did organization development. I did talent management, compensation, and benefits. I also had a geographical stint in US for a couple of years and a 6 month stint in Europe. And that gave me exposure across geographies and various facets of HR. Then I did a 4 year stint as head of talent management for Bosch Home Appliances. So I've switched sectors from IT to manufacturing, entirely different sectors, different requirements. The workforce is different. So it keeps you on your toes. The challenges are different, and you get to realize new things. You learn from different mentors, and then, of course, you're able to give back. And then I had an opportunity to drive the organization transformation at LSG Sky Chef. So I head HR for India, and we have two units in India, Bangalore and Hyderabad for the Sky Chefs unit. We operate at the airports, and of course, it's an industry behind the airline industry. The industry has kept me on my toes. There's lots to learn. There's lots to figure out. There's different challenges, unique perspectives, and that's what has kept me grounded and staying put so far.
Amazing. I mean, glad to know another mentor, another role model for someone moving from a software engineering into an HR. And that's very seldom or uniquely you will come across
Yeah.
someone who have made such a complete 360-degree transition because the love for coding and
Yeah.
then having the HR, I think it's been a great flip and glad the industry found an HR leader like you. Right.
Thank you so
And you spoke about the this industry, right? What makes this industry so unique, be it in terms of their workforce structure, the complexities, and the expectations? So, yes, throw some more lights about this industry and help us understand this better.
See, everyone we know takes a flight these days, right? So you're picking up an Indigo, you're going international, picking up an Etihad, and so on and so forth. So what we get, the meals that we get on board, there's a fierce engine that goes behind servicing those meals, right? And here at LSG Skychef, we do just that. So largely, we have two major divisions inside the company. One is the F&B, the culinary team, who take care of the meal specs, who really get the meals prepared on time with specifications, with the quality needed. And there's, of course, the operations, which are the loaders and packers and people who get the food on the airline equipment, and the airline equipment goes to the trucks and then goes to the airline. The complexity is there because we do 8 flights an hour. That's the kind of real time effort that goes in, and this churn happens 24/7, right? So our people work in multiple different shifts. They work 24/7. It's a highly regulated environment at both the airports and, of course, across all airports in India. You need to focus on a lot of quality measures. The aviation security is very strict. There is regulation in food safety, and compliances have to be met. And we are a factory, of course, right? So there are labor regulations and so on. So it's a highly complex environment, it's a quality centric environment, and a highly time bound environment as well, right? If we delay, any of our trucks delay, the flight gets delayed as well, and then of course the passenger experience is not that great. So behind every flight that goes on time and every meal that reaches to the right customer, there's a big engine that goes.
Wow. So would be safe to assume that LSG Skyshape or this industry is like a F&B industry, specifically catering to an airline's perspective,
Yeah,
whereas your regular F&B segments might have a larger B2C audience and the customers out there. But this is very specifically aligned to airlines and driven by very unique supply chain, because you need to have very strong supply chain operations, because as you said, for every successful flight you need to be there on time and your entire operations has to be planned in such a way.
correct. You're right. Yeah. So it is F&B, of course. Coming from an employee perspective, it's same. You do the same food manufacturing when you're in a hotel industry, for example. But of course, you have different customers, different counterparts. You get the variety there, but here the menus are strict. They are disciplined. Of course, there are cycles. But then an airline decides what goes on to the flight, what the customer would get, what the meal options are there. And this is very specifically catering to all airlines, domestic and international.
Very interesting. And since we are talking about the talent, the employability perspective, throw us some more light. What are the different core talent categories in this space, and how do hiring strategies vary across them, right? Because I'm sure for each professional category or each category for which you hire people, you would have a different hiring strategy in place, right? So help us understand somebody who's looking to enter into this industry, is fascinated by aviation or customer care, or from an hotel management or from an F&B perspective. Help us understand the core categories from where a candidate or an employee can look to build their careers in this segment.
Right. So that's a really good question. Largely, we have a 80% blue collared workforce, right?
Hmm.
And about 20% is white collar. So the major departments that we have is F&B, as you rightly said, and we hire people from various hotel management backgrounds. They could pick up a degree in hotel management. In fact, even without a degree, if they have the skill set, they have the culinary ability, we are ready to employ them, right? Because more than degrees, what you need is passion for food
Yeah.
and a passion for excellence in quality. People who have done some experience are also a great fit for the organization. So those are the teams, and of course, there are various levels of hierarchies in this. You start as a commis chef, you build up to a bakery chef. You have CDPs, you have DCDPs, and of course, you become sous chefs and the head culinary. So you have a good chain of places to go to. You have a good succession plan in place, and there's a lot of opportunity to grow in this space if you're really interested in culinary. The second leg and the very important one is our operational. Once
Hmm.
the food is ready, it needs to go to the right set of aircraft, to the right crew, and to on time delivery is very important. So which would mean that this there's various set of people needed in this entire chain. We have loaders and packers who pick up the food and put it on the right aircraft, who put it on the right airline equipment, and so on. They'll keep it ready, and then there are drivers who are highly skilled. They need to run heavy lift vehicles, and they need to have driving licenses in place. We do hire from the market, where people will have certain what you call skill sets in this area. You need to be very specifically able to drive the heavy lift vehicles. There is of course stringent requirements in terms of your airport driving passes. You have to pass an exam in the airport, and then only you get that. And there are proper trainings going on from time to time so that you are on abreast with various airport regulations and so on, because any simple delay or any simple issue or mistake can cause huge escalations and problems. Which means everyone that we hire has to go through stringent norms of health checkups and breath alcohol analyzer tests and so on. And of course, we have quality teams who take care of the hygiene aspects. There's food safety, there's hygiene, there's quality, and these inspections go on from time to time. There's security teams who take care of aviation security, so that
Okay.
every little thing is checked thoroughly. There's proper mechanisms to check each food particle, each food or each sandwich that goes through is checked thoroughly to an X-ray machine and so on. And then, of course, you have business enabling teams. So we have finance, we have HR, we have IT, we have purchase teams who help with the inventory, who help with the purchases of various small food items and so forth. And that helps this engine running. So we focus on helping our primary operations and culinary teams to make sure that the food goes on time, the entire value chain is ready in time.
You spoke about so many different categories, right? Be it from your blue collar workforce to the business support teams who's helping the entire workforce to stay together and enable the overall functions.
Yeah.
I want to understand how big actually is LSG Sky Shift today in India is. How many employees you have on ground, and what percentage would, as you mentioned, maybe assuming 80% is blue collar and
Yes.
20% would be in the business and living. So how big is the India ecosystem today?
So we are about 1,000 plus organization across two units. Largely, as you rightly said, 80% of our workforce is blue collar workers and 20% are business enabling functions. So the blue collar workforce is cutting across both Hyderabad and Bangalore. And
Hmm.
it's a mix of workforce as well, right? Some of our workforce is a contract workforce that keeps revolving, keeps shifting. And in every airport is an ecosystem of about 45 plus organizations, right? So that's one major challenge that we face. It's easy to find the resource because you have so many people working in the airport community, but it's also easy for somebody to jump ship very quickly, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons. And of course, we do have on-roll employees as well who are on permanent contracts who have stayed with us for maybe 10, 20 years and so on, and who enjoy working with us because they have a sense of belongingness with LSG.
Yeah. And then, you spoke about, I know you briefly touched upon some of the challenges, right? Especially from a retention perspective, attrition
Yeah.
management perspective. And then you also mentioned you hire a lot of people from the market, you have few people on roles. I'm assuming few people within third party payroll as well,
Yes.
right? So, could you share more insights and depth around your key challenges around attracting, retaining talent, especially considering that this is a highly competitive ecosystem? And as you mentioned, every airport has 45 organization as an average, right? So, what challenges and what perspective you guys enable and solve on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So let me touch upon the airport first. It's very interesting when you board a flight, you just see the ground operations and you're boarding an airline, right? But behind that, you have ground handling fleet, you have the catering trucks, and you have people who are working your trolleys, your bag management, and fuel management, and so on. And of course, you have your TFS, which you're providing various food options, beverages at various airports, and so on and so forth, right? So the ecosystem is really massive, and which is where it is easy to find resources. People coming from various migrant workforces there, so they'll
Hmm.
come, they're ready, they're passionate about working at an airport, and then they pick up nearby areas and they're stationed there. So it's easy to find resources. And of course, we have third party contracts, so there will be suppliers in terms of manpower planning. They help us recruit these resources from time to time. But the biggest challenge is it's a slightly hardship environment, right? It's a 24/7 setup. So you, of course, need to work in shifts. So people need to be available for, say, working in a night shift versus a day shift and so on. It's not like your 9 to 5. Um, then the second issue is that there are cold kitchens and there are hot kitchens, and of course, there's safety regulations, right? So you may be working in really hot temperatures or really cold temperatures for about 8 hours a day. And you also have to have masks and face shields and headgears and so on. And safety shoes are important. So it is not very easy. You don't get a break every now and then. And a lot of people will probably think it's good. They're passionate, but maybe because of health reasons and so on and so forth, some people lose out there, right? So we do have a churning population. It's easy to find resources, but it's also easy to lose resources if we don't retain them enough. So what we typically do is create a culture of belongingness in the organization. We do a lot of team events where people realize why of making this food, right? So you prepare a food and it goes to a diabetic sensitive person on an airline. You're actually helping them meet their dietary needs. And if you explain this to somebody on the ground, they will really relate to what I'm doing and what difference is it making, right? So then you have the passion that drives our employees. The second creative thing that we do is theme events. So we have done a lot of theme events in terms of German, Indian, Japanese, and so on, where we try to create the attire, the culinary arts of various cities and places. So people get to see, okay, there's a German flight I'm loading. This is what they're trying to eat. This is what they wear. This is the culture there, and I'm getting to experience this while being in India. because this is
Yeah.
something that they may not probably realize or do this, or they may not get an opportunity to go to a sector like this. Yeah. So these type of creative engagements help them make a sense of belongingness with the company. And as leadership, we are all open, right? We have open door policies. My door keeps revolving every day that I'm in office. Every 10 minutes there's a different person. There are 100 different problems to solve. But that also means 100 different ways to make a change. The leadership is very supportive, and we try and do sport events, celebrations, functions, and so on. So a lot of time people say, okay, you take care of me, that's fine, but you also take care of my family, and that is what I'm grateful for, right? So there are
Yeah.
staff events. If there's a medical emergency, we take care of them. So it feels like they would love to work for the organization because you get something meaningful out of it, right? It's not just your day in, day out, but you're really close to your colleagues, you're close to your managers, you get a chance to really make a difference in some people's life.
You spoke about a lot of people would be on third party payroll, right? And whereas you also hire people through your in-house channels, right?
Yeah,
And as you mentioned, it's as easy to hire people and equally easy to lose people
yeah.
also, right? So when you're hiring people on third party contracts, do you find challenges around compliances? Because you would have all your labor regulations, and as since you are part of the aviation ecosystem, you have a lot more scrutiny as well, right? Because from a clearance perspective, background checks perspective, right? So which is more challenging? Is it the contractual workforce, or is it the in-house employees what you hire? So from that perspective, what do you see, and what's your take on that?
I would say contractual workforce is definitely more challenging. You get them, no problem, but of course there's regulations, right? So we can't hire them without a police verification certificate in place. So their home locations have to be tracked, their education, background references have to be checked, and so on. And then only with the PVC that they are able to get onboarded. And this PVC is relevant only for a year or two because of airport regulations. So every year, every time frame, you have to renew this again and again, right? So you have to have really good partners, the third party agencies, who will help us do these reference checks, do this background verifications, and any single issue can result in a harm, right? So that's why it is very stringent regulation there. We also have health checkups because we are working with food. It is equally important that the health of the employee is good enough. And we have very stringent health checkups. There's annual health checkups that we organize from our company side. And this is also a mandate before anybody joins the organization. So those two lead to some time delay because even if you've identified a candidate, they can't get onboarded unless these compliances are in place. Yeah.
And then also another question I have is, since all this workforce is around airport area, right? So you would look for people who are in the near vicinity of the airports, because people don't like to travel long distance. For
Yeah.
example, in Bangalore, right? If you're looking to travel to the airport from the main city hub, it can even take from 1 hour to 2.5 hours, depending on where you're put up, right? And it's just a one way, right? To and fro would be a challenge from a talent perspective. So you try to hunt talent from the nearby airport communities, or how do you go about that?
And so, it is a mixed bag of population. I personally do a 1.5 hour travel every day, one way. And I've seen, one of my colleagues does a 2 hour every day. So it depends. Of course, you're invested in the company, you're passionate about it, you will do that. But it's nice to hire people from local areas because then you don't have to spend time so much in the commute. And our contract workforce is largely migrant. They may come from various
Mhm.
regions, and once you get a job, you try and settle down somewhere close to the office, right? So there are various communities that have developed within the airport and somewhere maybe 10 kilometers of the airport. So that helps, So they don't have to spend so much time in commute. They make friends there, and they're easy to find livable options and so on. So and like I said, the community shifts right from one organization to the other. They're very quick to switch. So it's easy for them as well from an employee perspective to find a lucrative jobs, maybe in a competitor another agency at the airport, and then maybe do the churn every year.
Interesting. A question just popped up in my mind. We keep reading news from the aviation ministry, from the various research articles, that the way the airline travel is gonna boom in India is gonna be massive, right?
Yeah.
The flow of passengers is only gonna increase, right? Which means more flights to be catered to in a shorter span of time. That means more operationally intensive work needs to be done on the work. We need to be more, how should I say, the organizations entire ecosystem, right? Be it the complementary, be it the supplementary industry from an aviation sector needs to ramp up their
Mhm.
way of working, right? So that's something happening, and then that's going to be the next big challenge for, for the aviation sector, right? How is LSG Skychef preparing for that? Because as you mentioned, right, every flight needs to take off on time. You guys are the backbone to ensure the end customer is happy, because if the meal is not good in the flight, the passenger or the customer is gonna curse the aviation, right? It's gonna be that airlines, the person is traveling, they will not know that who is behind this, right? So as the demands peak up, as more and more customer expectations increase, and this is true, right? The customer expectations are only gonna go up. They're gonna expect more and more things with time, right? They're not gonna lower down their expectations. So how is this industry gearing up for that, and how you look the workforce is gonna play a critical role in that way?
So you're perfectly, on point when you say the aviation industry is growing. People have more disposable incomes. More and more people are taking the
Yes.
airlines these days. Right? So it's very easy to grow an industry like that. And in India, there's untapped potential, right? We're only in about tier one, tier two cities right now, but airports are
Absolutely.
coming up in tier three towns as well. Airport industry, the aviation industry is bound to, it's slated for growth. And of course, if people fly, they want to need food on the flight as well. So, any food catering industry for airlines will also grow as well. Even in the past few years, since COVID, of course, there was a downturn when
Yes.
the flights were not flying enough. But since then, since we've rebounded, there's a 16% flight volume increase every year, right? That's a huge increase. So which means the industry has to be ready to ensure this complex environment works. You have to have right set of people on board. You have to make sure that they have enough training in place from time to time. Any kind of feedback is very much welcome. So the customer feedback goes to the airline gives us the feedback, and then we make those changes. So
Mhm.
any kind of expectations are there, they are met. And if there is a mismatch, of course, there's a feedback system in play so that the things can be improved over time. Any person who leaves us, the replacement engine has to be as of yesterday. Yeah, so that's the kind of agility that we need. But also keep in mind the regulation. So the recruitment is almost a daily practice here. We really don't want it to be that way, but it's how the industry is. So we have to be on our toes every now and then. We have to increase the staff. We have to also ensure that they are retained in the organization. We have to ensure that there are creative teams to keep them engaged. There are various sports celebrations and so on, so that they feel like this is a place to be, right? And you don't have to switch that often. And of course, benefits are passed on, and feedback is taken in terms of employee town halls. There's recognition in place in every monthly, quarterly, and yearly. There is staff events. We do take care of people who are doing regular attendance, for example, right? So you try and motivate people by rewarding a performance that you actually need. And then you have support systems in place. We provide education opportunities for people who really want to skill and grab those succession plan opportunities. We also have, what do you call, a financial assistance in place. So if there's a need, somebody goes ill and there's problems, and the company takes care of them. And of course, we have a valid medical insurance and accidental insurance that takes care of the people. So all this is in place so that our HR policies are geared to support the business, and the business can grow with the speed of the aviation industry.
Amazing. You brought up one point, which is the new airports are coming in tier two cities, right? And that's the expansion what we see now happening. And you also mentioned in a conversation, a lot of the workforce what we have are migrant workers, right? Now, um, I'm making an analogy, like if the airport operations and new airports comes up in tier two, tier three cities, the migrant workers can find the jobs and the livelihoods in the respective cities or the places they have come from,
Yeah.
right? In that case, there would be a strong need to develop the ecosystem in the local geos. Do you think the industry like yours, which is so regulated, where security is such a high importance, gig workers can play a role? Like, and why I'm saying gig workers, if I look at how Zomato and Swiggy have scaled up in India, I think they have created an altogether new industry and a kind of an employment opportunities which never existed before they came into ecosystem, right? They brought in quick commerce and other thing, and gig workforce all of a sudden is such a big thing, and so many employment and I would say livelihood earning opportunities
Mm.
have come to the people. So, do you think a gig workforce could also be an avenue or a potential strategy to implement in your industry as the ecosystem expands and grow?
So you touched upon a couple of points, so gig workforce is welcome, but I do think it'll be slightly difficult as compared to a Zomato or a Swiggy because the regulations and compliances are not as stringent,
Exactly.
right? So to be a delivery person, you really don't have to have maybe a health check done or a PVC in place, and this has to be a regular thing. It's not just a one of a kind. So the regulated industry will always drive workforce which is more permanent, who would want to stick around for long term because you invest, right? You have to, as an organization you're investing, as a person employable you're also investing in certain compliance, right? So therefore I would say that gig industry is probably not that much of a reality at this point. Maybe in the future of course we can expect it if the labor models change, if there are
Hmm.
various different ways of employing people. And with tier 2 towns and tier 3 towns coming up, it is good for aviation. But at the moment, there will still be metros who are really 10 times the size, right? So you have at Indigo Airline operating about 200 daily flights from Bangalore versus maybe say Ayodhya would have maybe five, right? So even if you have those airports coming up, you will not match the scale of a metro city, and therefore the migrant workforce will still find jobs in various different metros. And of course, having said that, there's also a local population that we develop because being an airport community, we also take care of our surroundings. So there are various villages in Karnataka, in Telangana, for example, and they come on board with the
Hmm.
promise of getting an employment, getting to stay on board for long. And so it's a mixed bag. It's not just migrant workforce, but it's a mixed bag of people coming in from various regions and nationalities and speaking different languages, and that's what makes this mix very interesting. So you get to work together, you get to learn from different sectors and people are coming in from different regions. And I think we also want that to happen, right? Because you build a diverse holistic ecosystem rather than depending on one state or one city and so on.
Yeah. No, I think so much of great insights, great points, and a great perspective you have brought into this conversation. And I personally am very enlightened about this ecosystem, right? I'm more confident and I know a lot more things now about the aviation catering industry than what I knew before. And I'm sure the people who are watching this episode would also have the same perspective to it. This brings us to the end of our discussion and the conversation. Any final inputs and closing lines from your side, Harsha, for the viewers?
So I can take this opportunity from your podcast to ask people to join us.
I'm sure a lot of people would be interested because, in India, if you look about, people are still have very limited information about the emerging sectors and
Yeah,
the job industries, right? And I feel it's very important and vital for people to educate themselves about the emerging industries, the segments where the new jobs are getting created, right? And it would enable them to explore more avenues. And also, it's like they can always have a plan B in place, right? If one thing is not working, they always have plan B or a plan C to try and try their hands upon and make a success out there. So I'm sure that a lot more people would be encouraged to know more about this industry and probably reach out to you as well.
of course. Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. It's good to bring the behind the scenes to mainstream to, create knowledge about this industry. And it is very interesting, there's a whole chain of stuff that happens to bring your meal on board. And, every single entity has to work in tandem, in proper fashion, in coordination with each other, so that what you see on an airline gets met, the food needs of a customer gets met. And it's interesting, and I'm glad I got this opportunity to bring a lot of these different behind the scenes to various people, right? So I will be very hopeful that people watch this podcast. And again, thank you for the opportunity that you are doing this in space with HR Insider, right? So bringing different industries to the knowledge of workforce, to creating that insightful conversation with various leaders. You're doing an amazing job as well, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Harsha. It's absolutely my pleasure to have leaders like you to be part of this podcast and share their knowledge with all the people out there in the ecosystem. So, to all the viewers, this brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this discussion enlightening, Don't forget to subscribe to us, leave us a review, and share this episode within your network. Stay tuned for more conversations with the HR leaders navigating the complexities of today's workforce. Thanks for listening in today. Until next time, this is your host, Harshal, signing off. Have a great day ahead.